Hello, everybody, and welcome to The Adult Chair on rashpixel.fm. I'm Pete Wright, and I am thrilled, as always, to be here with Michelle Chalfant. Hello, Michelle.
Hi, Pete.
I don't know how we ended up having this conversation today, Michelle. You don't even have any kids in this age group. All of yours are leaving. They're aging out. And yet here we're talking, it's amazing. We're talking about middle school today, and we have a fantastic guest who is going to share her insights on the middle school experience and some bullying and some social scene stuff. And I actually do have middle school age kids, so I'm really excited, helping me through my trauma. How about that? Before we get started, head over to theadultchair.com to learn more about this show. You can subscribe for free by signing up to our mailing list and find us anywhere the finest podcasts are served with a quick search for The Adult Chair. You can join the conversation on Facebook or Twitter. We would love to hear from you. Before we get started, don't forget, we also have the Spring Intensive coming up at the Scarlett Bennett Center, May 6th and 7th. Registration is open now. Get your name on that list at michellechalfant.com. It's the first thing right there on the homepage. You can just click on the workshop and get your name on that list. It is going to be a fantastic 2 days, right?
Oh, my goodness. It's the best of the best. If you like this podcast, come live it. For 2 days. We're going to do it's going to be a blast. We're going to do so much in 2 days, and we're going to really experience, you're not listening anymore. You're going to have the experience of living in the child chair, living in the adolescent, which no one wants to do, but we're going to work on that adolescent chair, and then get everybody to leave living fully in their adult chairs.
Excellent. And I imagine the stakes are high, that you actually will probably have to go out of your way to have really great chairs.
Yes, I am.
Don't you think? The Scarlett Bennett Center may live up to this. It will have to live up to some very large chairs for your adult chair. I can't wait. This is great. Scarlett Bennett Center, May 6th and 7th. Registration open right now. Please join Michelle for this fantastic Spring Intensive.
Yeah.
All right, here we go. Michelle Icard. She's the author of Middle School Makeover, Improving the Way You and Your Child Experience the Middle School Years. She's a member of the Today Show parenting team and NBC's Education Nation. She's a contributor to the Washington Post OnParenting section and Your Teen magazine. And she's been featured in the Chicago Tribune and the Christian Science Monitor. She's all over the place. What perfect experience to bring to this show to talk about middle school. Michelle Icard, welcome to The Adult Chair.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Welcome, Michelle. So nice to have you.
I've never been interviewed by a Michelle before, and I almost jumped in on your intro when you said, "Hi, Michelle."
I've actually been trying to figure out, what do we need to have, nicknames or code names? One of you is going to be called Barracuda. The other is going to be called
Sweet.
We're going to need some code names to get through this show.
I'm so happy to have you, because you're right, Pete. I don't have middle school kids anymore. I have one in college and one in high school. However, I did have middle school kids, and I have a lot of clients, and of course, a lot of fans on Facebook and in our closed group, and all kinds of people that will maybe even private message me about, what do I do in this with my child? This is going on at school. Do you have any advice for me? I've gotten a lot of those questions. So that's why, Michelle, we have you on today as our expert with middle school kids. So
terrific.
First of all, social media. When my son was in 5th grade, and he's a sophomore now, so 5 years ago, I remember that's when all the kids were starting to get cell phones. And he had a flip phone, and he was behind the times because everyone else had a smartphone. But nowadays, I'm guessing everybody has, smartphones, and they have access to the entire internet. So with these kids that are curious going into middle school, what do you recommend? Talk to us about that a little bit.
Sure.
What's your approach?
Yeah, when I started doing this work, it was about 12 years ago. So I have really kind of also grown up with the emergence of social media in middle school, and not just the emergence of it, but how it's become such a hot topic issue for parents and for kids. And to your point, if you ask a kid in middle school, they will say, yes, everyone has a smartphone. But if you ask a parent of a middle schooler, you might get a different answer. So it's the classic case where kids are saying, but I'm the only one who doesn't have it. I do think that there is some truth that most kids have a smartphone when they're in middle school. And I tend to be pretty empathetic to that. It's a great way to stay connected with other kids. And I think kids are less and less connected to each other in real life, in real time these days.
Yeah, that's true.
And they crave time with each other, particularly starting in about 6th grade. As you know, they begin to start to dip their toe into the water of who am I as a person apart from my family. And so that drives a real need to connect with their peers for approval, to figure that out, all of that. So social media does that. That's something nice that it does. And of course, we all know that there are some scary and upsetting things that it can do too. So my general take on social media is can be good, can be bad. It is a tool. And like any tool, parents should be involved in the beginning in teaching their kids how to use the tool and watching their kids use the tool, but then they should really pull back. You wouldn't forever watch your kid cut an apple with a knife, right? Initially you would, but ultimately that would be weird.
Yeah.
Well, and what's so interesting about it too, like, we talk about sort of the socialization function of these things, but there is a real practical use to these things. And in fact, the school now is much more bullish on getting the kids connected, giving them their own Google account, getting them to use these tools. And I think the bigger challenge, at least my observation is, the bigger challenge that the schools, in their demands of and teaching the kids how to use these things appropriately, they lag behind the kids' access to these technologies, right? They're in some regards 10 to 15 years late on figuring out how to teach responsible use of these things, and they're just getting good at it now after we have effectively half a generation of kids who have had to deal with the scary stuff without any background. What do you think? Am I making stuff up?
No, I think that that's the case, although I don't think you said that they're lagging behind in teaching them how to use them appropriately. I don't think they're teaching that at all. I mean, I think
not doing it at all yet. Well, they're still in the lag phase. How about that?
I think so. I wish that there were more focus on etiquette and less on sort of just the technical aspect of it. And
here's how you turn in your paper is,
right.
That's table stakes. Now, how do you be a smart citizen?
Very, very good. Yeah. And I think parents also tend to jump towards, how do I keep my child safe from a predator? And that's probably not going to be, it's probably not going to happen, right? But it's much more likely that your child is going to say something really hurtful to another kid without thinking about it and damage that kid, or have that happen to them. Less likely that someone's going to try to court them online and steal them. I mean, I know that does happen from time to time, but statistically speaking, far less of a possibility.
What do we do though? I mean, what do you recommend for the parents to help these kids? I mean, it's hard to navigate. I remember in our school, in middle school, when my younger son was in 7th grade, some boy had gotten this girl to take a picture of her boobs and sent to him. And then guess what he did with it? He blasted it out to all of his friends. So then some kids got suspended. It was this whole thing. But these kids were like 13. I think how young they were. They didn't know what they were doing.
Yeah, I hear you. It is.
You know what I'm saying?
Sure. It's highly frustrating because it does serve a practical purpose, but the great unknown is so great and so unknown that it scares us. And I think parents tend to default to, if I monitor, I'm doing a good job, or I need to be monitoring more, or there's got to be an app I can put on or something I can do that will limit them technically in what they're able to do. Or heck, I just won't give them a phone. Why do they need it? I think that is a little late to the game. My recommendation is that you don't rely on technology. This is sort of good old-fashioned parenting meets modern technology situation. So if you're worried about your child taking a picture of herself topless or coercing another kid to do that, and both of those kids probably made mistakes that any nice, normal person would make, right? Then what you ought to be doing is having conversations about that. So early on, before even getting a phone, and I know parents freak out and say, I don't want to put this on my kid's radar. but somebody else is going to put it on there. So
right.
Have conversations about what's appropriate. Talk about stuff you've seen in the news. Tell this story if you're listening to this podcast. Hey, there was once a girl who took a photo and this is what happened. But just don't be afraid to have those kinds of conversations, really adult conversations, before you give your kid the technology.
I think that is great advice. And so many parents that I talk to are afraid to have those conversations with their kids. They don't know how to do it. They rely on church. They rely on teachers. And I keep saying to them, it's your job. It's a big job. You've got to talk to your kids and be open about things that might make you uncomfortable. And it's hard for them. But I think it's really, really important. Really, really important.
And you have to cover a lot of stuff.
Yes.
Right. But the thing is, you have to cover a lot of stuff, but you don't have to cover everything. You have to cover enough ground that your child understands that they can talk to you about anything. So if you've already told your kid that people take topless photos or, other photos and share them online, then they know they can come to you when they see that. But if you've never mentioned it before, they're going to keep that quiet because it's a taboo in your house.
Well, I love the way you put that. And what's really funny, it's almost like this conversation of teens and technology is the new sex talk.
Yes.
It's hard to have this conversation, but it sure has made the sex talk easier. Everything's relative.
What will come next where we'll be like, I wish we could just talk about nude pics on...
Yeah.
It's so true. I remember I'm thinking back to my middle school, my son, who is my younger one again. I remember I had a mom come up to me and say, did you know that so-and-so was showing all of our kids porn and da-da-da? And I'm like, oh my God, he had porn on his phone. What do you say about, again, what I'm thinking your answer is going to be is just what we were talking about. It's preparing the kids before they get a phone, not to look at that kind. I've said that to my boys. I'm like, listen, you're going to see porn. It's sex that's inappropriate. Don't look. You don't want that in your brain. You're too young. I have said that so many times to my kids. However, I'm sure they're curious. And if their kid has a smartphone, I'm sure they did it. I know they did it when they were in middle school.
Right.
But is there any other, other than talking to them and being open, what else can we do? Nothing really. Just
open. I hate to be a broken record, and you're right. I do essentially kind of fall to the same line again. I will say that, I had this talk with my son too, who's 14 right now, and we try to have little talks along the way. I find it helpful to cram them into a commercial break, so he knows it's a finite, quick point I'm going to make, and then right. It'll be over and it won't be too awkward. But I think kids like to have things explained to them. So not just don't look at porn, but here's why not to look at porn. Here's what it does to your brain. I explained it like it's like eating sugar, and then you need more sugar, and then suddenly you're sick from the sugar, and it's not enjoyable anymore.
Yeah.
So explain it why you feel that way, which is difficult because you have to really think about why you feel that way. And a lot of times we don't. We just say, something's bad. I know it's bad. Everybody else has told me it's bad. So that's it. But you have to investigate, get your line down, know what you're going to say, and then get in and get out with the conversation. And then as it relates to technology, you can't rely on technology to parent for you. So you have to keep having the same uncomfortable conversations. And I think that's the best you can do. And it's pretty effective.
This is such a hard time for kids. I noticed with my older son, I remember when he hit 6th grade, I thought, oh my God, is he depressed? What's happening? Mm-hmm. And he just went so internal, and he went from outgoing, and he just was pensive and internal. And, I realized he went from talking to me all the time where he stopped talking to me and not sharing his feelings as much with me. So, and I can't speak for girls, but for boys, and I'm wondering, what do you recommend? How do you keep the dialogue open with these kids other than maybe just doing, again, asking a lot of questions and reflective listening? But what happens to them, and how do we keep that the dialogue open with them? What would you recommend?
So in terms of what's happening to your kid, I like to think of these years as a construction project. And your kid is building 3 things beginning at around age 11 that they need to become an adult. So they're working on an adult body, an adult brain, and their adult identity. And those 3 things are really difficult. So if you think about those things, the body is the easiest one to understand because we can see it happening and it's linear. So you don't take 3 steps forward and then 2 steps back when it comes to your body's development. But with identity and brain stuff, it feels to parents like you do. You might have a day when you think, oh, we've turned a corner. He's suddenly responsible. He's remembering to turn in his homework. He's not arguing with me. And then a few days later, boom, you're back where you were. So that feels frustrating for parents. From a kid's perspective, they don't have any way of gauging their progress. And that can make you feel sort of depressed and anxious and worried and pensive and reflective. So I'm working on a new body. I'm feeling all of these new kind of identity issues. Am I a spaz? Am I a kid who wants to wear makeup, or do I still want to play with dolls, or do I want to be popular? All of that stuff. And there's no way to know if you're right or if you're on track. And so middle schoolers get a bad rap, particularly girls, for being judgmental. But I think it has to do with the fact that you're walking down the hallway at school not knowing if you're normal. So you're looking at everybody else around you to try to figure out, am I normal or not? So I'm going to compare to that kid and then that kid and then that kid. And it comes across as judging. But I really think it comes from a place of anxiety and fear about your own changes and your own development and where you fit in based on that. Yep. So that, I think, might explain some odd shifts in behavior. And then should I talk about how to get your kid to keep talking to you through all of that?
Yes, that would be great. Like how, especially, again, when my sons have dated girls and the girls come over, I realize I'm not such a bad mom. It's just I have boys and they don't want to talk. Where girls are like, they're talking to me nonstop. I'm like, oh, this is what I had a sister. So I didn't have brothers. So I didn't know what to expect with boys. But yes, so tell us, please enlighten us.
Sure. And I have to ask, since I have a boy and a girl too, I'm wondering, did you notice that when your boys had their friends over, their friends would talk to you, even though
all the time?
Yes.
Yeah.
And I love it. So I'm like, invite your friends over, please. I need to know something about you. Yeah.
Exactly. And then when their friends would talk to me, my sons would roll their eyes like, oh, Mom, please, like, let us go. They don't want to talk to you. And their friends were like, yes, I do. I like your mom.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, right. Well, the worst thing you can do is say, hey, I like that kid. Invite him over some more. That's the last time you'll ever see that kid.
Forget it.
Yeah.
That's so true. That's funny. So here is my advice, and it relates to this idea of kids feeling judged all day long. They come home. They are completely exhausted from the facade of having to act like they are normal and they are progressing just like everybody around them. So they come home to you and you ask them a question. How was your day? If you ask it in a certain tone or with a certain facial expression, chances are pretty good your child will interpret that as anger. So I don't know if you read that really interesting study that came out of McLean University where they looked at, they put adults and kids through an MRI. Did you read that one? Where they?
No.
Okay, so this is so cool. They put adults through an MRI and then they showed them pictures of people's faces. And they said, just by looking at this person's face, can you tell me what they're feeling? And adults could do it accurately all the time. And they could tell because they were in an MRI that they were using their prefrontal cortex. So then they put teenagers through, same thing, showed them the same pictures. And because teens don't use their prefrontal cortex very well until kind of their early to mid-20s, they were using their amygdalas or the emotional center of their brain. Mm-hmm. So they were getting it wrong half the time. They were looking at someone's face and almost always defaulting to anger. That person's mad, even when that person wasn't mad. So
that just answered like my whole house.
Right. Do you have a son or a daughter?
I have both. And okay. they actually, my daughter just finished middle school and my son is about to start it. And so probably the most common phrase uttered by my kids by frequency alone is, why are you so mad?
Yes.
Right?
I hear that too.
I'm not mad. You would think I'm just a rage monster the way they talk about this. I'm not mad at all. In fact, I am, dare I say, emotionless about this particular topic. I don't know where you get this.
As you should be. That's what kids want. They do want you to be emotionless, but they are handicapped in the sense that they cannot read facial expressions through no fault of their own, really until they're in their early 20s. Yeah. So they will default. I mean, you ask your kid, how did that science test go? And if you wrinkle your eyebrows at all, they're like, fine, why are you getting mad at me? Yeah. And they stomp. Yes. Right? So
Yes.
Here's my tip. This is the best thing. And I've had so many parents say to me, this is the biggest game changer for keeping my kid talking to me through the teen years. It is to have what I call a Botox brow. So you don't actually need to stick a needle in your forehead. You can just pretend. We've all seen those actors and actresses who've had too much Botox and they cannot show emotions. Be that. Pretend that is you, and don't wrinkle up your brow or your eyes. And I often do that because I think it's me connecting. I'm showing you how invested I am by really scrunching up my face, and kids hate that.
Yeah.
So
What's so funny is that's what your instinct is, right? It's I'm with kids. I need to be more emotive and animated like a cartoon because they're kids, and that's how you talk to kids.
Exactly. Nope.
Right. But starting in middle school, they're terrible at that. And also, this is why it's a good idea to text with your kids.
Oh, there you go. Now they have to have the phones.
Right.
And here I get mad when my kids text me when they're in the house. I'm like, would you just come downstairs? But they do text. They will text a lot on their phone.
We text from room to room in our house all the time.
Dinner's ready on the text.
Yeah.
I've gotten lazy about that. But yeah, I think there's something to be said for, it's frustrating for them to misread us all the time and to have us say, I'm not angry, but to have them really believe, but I saw it on your face that you were. So just remove all of that doubt. And the other thing is with boys, and girls too, but I find more with boys in middle school, it helps to picture your child as a cat. And if when your kid comes in from school, you pounce on them and you're brushing their hair and petting them and you want to know everything from them, they want to retreat. But
they push back harder. They go,
right. But if
why are you asking me so many questions? Yeah.
They hate that.
Sorry.
But if you're too busy for them, they're like the cat that comes around when you're trying to type on your keyboard and jumps on your keyboard, and
Oh my God, you're so right.
I love that so much. I say around my house, why do you act like our cat? And now I know I should just treat them like our cat. That is brilliant.
That really is brilliant.
So be disinterested. I'll say like, oh, you know what? I want to hear about your Spanish test, but I don't have time now. So I'm going to ask you later after dinner. And then I'll go away.
And then they're like, but I want to tell you now.
Right.
That's really
awesome.
good.
Can I pivot just a little bit back into the actual middle school building? I am so curious. I say this. Maybe I'm projecting a bit too much, but I say this. Gosh, I walk in here. It's just not the same as it was when I was a kid. This experience is different. But I have a hard time when I hear other people saying that quantify what really is different about the organism that is middle school. What has changed that these kids are going through when they go into the building that I never had to face? Is that something you reflect on?
Let me be sure I understand. Are you saying that you think that middle school today is vastly different than middle school when you were there?
That's my question. Is it?
Okay, is it? No, I don't think it is. I think that that construction project that I mentioned where you're building your body, your brain, and your identity has always been there. Of course, we know from research that puberty has started to set a little bit earlier, so I think that is a little bit of a complication. But generally speaking, we're going through the same developmental stuff that we've always gone through. Here's what I think makes it harder. Social media, for one, although I've told you I'm a fan of it, and I am, it does complicate things because it can cause you to feel isolated even when you're not at school, whereas we used to get a break from that feeling. On the other hand, it can cause you to feel connected. So
even when you're not at school.
Yeah, pros and cons.
Yeah.
The other thing that I think is different and is hard is that parents seem to be way more involved now. So it's more eyeballs watching you and judging you and telling you how you should be doing.
That's my sense of it too. I often wonder if I'm even making, not challenging my own assumptions enough, that really the experience of growing up is just hard, whether you're doing it now or 35 years ago. It's still hard, and it's still a physiological process and an emotional process, and somehow there is light at the end of the tunnel as long as you can talk about it without fear, maybe. And you talk about social media, you talk about porn, you talk about all these things that we also went through, and I guess if I can be a guide that can approach these things openly and without fear, I will not communicate, the closed experience with fear to my kids.
Right. I think that's really well said.
I have a really quick question for you. Mm-hmm. Speaking of being in school, I was just thinking about a client I had yesterday who said that her daughter, she's in middle school, just stopped liking her best friend that she's had for 12 years. Mm-hmm. And we were talking about, what does that feel like for the girl that was suddenly ostracized or suddenly, my client's daughter turned her back on her best friend because she just said, I just don't really like her anymore and I don't want to talk to you about it, Mom. Like, It's as simple as that. So if you have a kid that's getting ostracized by friends at school, how as a parent do we treat that child? How can we help our child?
Well, I can tell you that I went through that when I was in middle school, and it stayed raw for a very long time. That's not to say that it's not a completely normal thing to have happen in middle school when you're trying to figure out who you are and you're developing into someone new, and you're just not interested in the same stuff that you used to be interested in, people included. So I think that is fair and reasonable. As a parent, I would coach my child to on how you separate from someone and remain dignified and treat them with dignity, even though you don't want to spend a lot of time together. Mm-hmm. So I would work on it from that angle. If my child were the one who wanted to separate, and if my child were the one who had been ousted, I think I would first normalize that by talking about how that happens all the time and explaining why that happens. And then I would be sure to get them involved in other activities where they could make new friends, because kids can begin to believe about themselves at that age that they're not a good friend. They're not good at making friends. And so if you don't give them some opportunities to have success, they don't unbelieve that.
That's what I was going to say. They start forming beliefs that maybe there's something wrong with me. I'm broken. I'm not a good friend. I don't know how to make friends. What's wrong with me? And it can spiral down. I like that. So really get them involved to meet other kids.
And also I will add that it doesn't just come from meeting other kids. Like for me, I got involved with theater, which is a great place for kids who are a little different. Mm-hmm. And, it wasn't that I made friends there. It was that I developed confidence again there. So any kind of activity can work.
Okay. And last question for you.
Yeah.
Just if you could just touch on this. What do you do if you have a kid that's getting bullied? How can you help your kid?
So first thing is to be sure you understand, are they being bullied? Because I see some parents with a real knee-jerk reaction and it's not bullying. So I would look into that first, understanding what it really means to be bullied. Second thing I would do is talk to the school, because schools have a real low tolerance for this. So if they can switch your child to another class, anything that they can do to create a buffer. Kids need experiences where they can learn how to talk to a bully and stand up and be an advocate for themselves. So there are some great programs that provide that kind of experience. You can practice it at home. I mean, it takes, I think, 10 seconds, they say, to talk back to a bully for them to stand down. So you can count that out at home and understand what that feels like. And as a last resort, if it's really bad, I would look at switching schools and giving your child the opportunity to have a fresh start.
I like that. I like that standing down. I like the role playing at home. I've done that with my kids, not with bullying, but with other things. I think that's powerful.
Yeah.
And really the particular gem of assigning time to the experience, right? Really to understand what time feels like when you're in a heightened state, an adrenal state is what a great recommendation.
Great.
Mm-hmm. Love it.
That's wonderful.
Thank you, Michelle.
Michelle, you are fantastic. Thank you so much. In terms of where you would like people to find you, I shared a whole bunch of the stuff that you're doing, probably just a fraction of it. Where would you like to send people to learn more about you and your work?
Oh, thanks for asking. My website is Michelle Icard, so it's MichellEicard.com, and that will take you to a bunch of different resources.
Well, that's really easy.
I have to say, I love that you're double L, Michelle.
Yeah.
I like that. So am I.
Awesome.
This has been so great. Thank you so much for your time and expertise on this rocky subject. We sure appreciate it.
Thank you both.
And Michelle Chalfant, thank you as ever for your time and insights. This was a good one.
Was a good one. Yeah, it's very good.
Thank you, everybody, for downloading and listening to this show. We sure appreciate your time and attention as you support the show. And I don't say this often enough. If you have a second and you like the show, we sure would appreciate it if you jumped into iTunes and leave a review. It helps other people to discover this show. When they see your friendly reviews, iTunes surfaces it right up in the search. So that it helps us out if you take 2 minutes to do that. We sure appreciate it. Thank you very much. On behalf of Michelle and Michelle, I'm Pete Wright, and we'll catch you next time right here, sitting right here in the adult chair.